should be enough chairs to go around. You guys are feeling vaccinated and you know that you're safe with your social distancing. You guys can do each other if you want, if you're friends or whatever. But there's tape on the floor for social distancing. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jack, for coming all the way down here. And yeah, this afternoon, I'm not sure what Jack has in store for us. Maybe a little poetry, maybe a little bowls, maybe a little cups. So, Donnie, further ado, here's Jack.
Good, thank you. Thanks a lot, Andrew. Thanks to all of you for coming. I made a few cups this morning. I thought I'd make something maybe a little different to start out with. So, I use some of the school clay here. In the bucket. Okay, thank you.
Need water?
Yeah, I was just about to pour some. Oh, whenever I come to Westchester, I feel like an artifact. I graduated 60 years ago in 1961. I came here because my academic record in high school was really wretched. I was what I call a sub-salutatorian. I graduated next to last in my class in high school, but I was halfway decent in sports, and so I was able to get into Westchester if I majored in phys ed. And that's what I did for 2 years. And then I had an epiphany during a tap dancing class in my second year. And it was in this gym over here at the corner of 2 streets. It has a really steep pitched roof with shingles on it. It's a foreboding looking building, and it had a big gym with parquet floors and the smell of wrestling mats. And there was a young woman playing the Darktown Strutters ball on a piano up in the front. And we were all spaced like this, 50 guys, alphabetically spaced. And right in the middle of my tap dancing routine, I stopped and asked myself, what are you doing with your life? And I thought, yeah, what am I doing with my life? And I walked away. I can still hear Mr. Davis's voice yelling, Troy, Troy. I went back and I took off my shoes with the clickers on the toes. I took off my blue stretchy pants and my white t-shirt. And I walked across the street and I became an English major. And that changed everything. I started to go out for plays. I started hanging out with theater people, rooming with them. And it was remarkable. The English department chairman had a little card on his desk. It said, there are no dull subjects, only dull writers. And so I thought, yeah, I really liked Emerson and Thoreau and all the transcendentalists. And so that became my life for quite a few years. I taught high school English down near Swarthmore in Media. And it was there that the high school art teacher showed me how to make pots in 1962. And I never found a reason to stop making them. And it was just an amazing succession of teaching both English and ceramics for 5 years at Juniata College. I started there in 1967, and for some reason, they let me start a ceramics department, even though I didn't have a degree. And I was able to teach ceramics there for 39 years until I retired in 2005. And that's the story of my life. And here I am today, back where I started, a different person, and really enjoying it. I love talking about what I do and answering questions. And I'm happy to do my best at answering any questions you have. Oh, and I made a mistake this morning that I've never made before at a workshop, and that is I would like people to introduce themselves. It's important to me to know who's here, and maybe just a word or two about your background and what. Want to start?
Sure. My name is Sophia Carroll. I'm a junior here at Westchester, and I'm also one of the ceramic interns for the department.
Good. So, and
I'm Maya. I am also an intern here at Westchester. I'm in my senior year. And yeah, that's it.
yeah.
I'm Joanne. I like to make pots, and I work for the DMV in New Jersey, out of Pennsylvania. So, yeah, that kind of says it all.
We met, what, 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I met Jack. I took like a 5-day seminar. It was in New York.
Yeah.
Upstate, and fell in love with soda firing from that. I was already a little bit in love with wood firing, and we've kind of kept up a correspondence, and I really enjoyed Jack's work, and that's why I wanted to come out here today.
Yeah, yeah. And, Joanne's been out and fired with us, and she'll be back again this summer.
Yep.
We hope. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Christy. I am a retired elementary school art teacher, and I brought my Jack toy mug that I purchased, I think in, what, we said 1971?
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit of history in a handbag. There it is. Great, thanks. That gives you free admission. Okay, yeah.
My name is Jody Davidson. I also am an alumni from Westchester's art department here. I think I graduated in 2001 or 2. And I'm a ceramics teacher at Kennett High School for the last 10 years. And I like to make pots too.
Terrific, and you know Pam Lau.
I do.
Yep.
Mary Lou, I'm a senior,
Yes.
and I take classes here in pottery, and I took some in painting. I taught preschool for 40 years, and I taught art for about 6 years.
Yeah.
And now I just dabble in a lot of different things, but I've gotten stuck in clay.
Uh-huh.
It must be the mud aspect.
Yeah. Do you work by hand or on the wheel?
I
Or?
like by hand best.
Mhm.
I'm not very good on the wheel.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yes.
My name is Tyra Martin. I'm a mixed media artist from Norristown, Pennsylvania. I hold a degree, an associate's degree in fine arts from Montgomery County.
Yeah.
And a bachelor's degree from Westchester University, class of 27.
Yeah.
I'm an older student. I'm 28. I wandered in here after doing visual designing for a year, and then realized I wanted to go back to school. And then I met Andrew, and I fell in love with ceramics ever since. I've always wanted to do it. I hated it in high school, but when I got here, I was like, I want to make giant cups.
Fabulous. Well, you have a great teacher, as you know, so keep at it. Yes.
I'm Elaine. Can you hear me? Can I do this thing? Well, I met you back in the 70s around Penn State. As a grad student there, I was in the Potter's Guild in Vermont, and I think you came out and did
All right.
a long time. And then I have a bowl from I showed you before from 95 for very different from your work here.
Oh, it's always changing.
And then I took a workshop with you last year, 2 years ago, gosh, the year has disappeared, at Yellow Springs with Jody. And so it was
Yeah.
very interesting. Anyway, I'm a retired faculty here at Westchester University, and so when I retired, I started doing clay again, because I hadn't done it since the 70s. And so I've been trained by Andrew for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And met all kinds of interesting people and love it. And I've missed it for the last year.
Sure. Thank you. John, we know you.
Yeah, I think I
We'll
know
pass
her.
over you. Yes, please.
Well, hi, I'm Ann. Nice to see you. I'm a student of Rhoda's, so maybe third or fourth generation. So been studying and making for 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah.
I love being on the wheel, but I also like doing wheel and hand building together.
Yeah. Terrific. Well, thanks for coming. Yes.
Yeah, my name's Rich Lopez. I'm a retired engineer. And when I retired, I was fortunate to live very close to Mitch Lyons.
Oh.
And I've enjoyed hand building and primarily with colored clays. And I've always liked Mitch's salt-fired pots. And so this is another opportunity perhaps to look at salt firing and colored clays as a base.
Yeah.
And then see what we get.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what's so great about firing with a kiln that has fire in it, as compared to heating pots in a kiln that has heat but no fire. I tried something like this on a small scale the other day at home, and I thought I'd see if I could do something bigger along the same lines. This is a school body, and it has a fair amount of coarse clay in, I believe. I'm hoping to come back to it tomorrow when it's leather hard.
Is that a tool that you made yet?
No, this is actually a commercial tool. It has a stamp on it, I think. Although I did have my friend make some. It's pretty handy.
Is it okay if we take a photo?
Yeah.
Okay.
The little one of these that I did worked out really nicely in the wood kiln. And I want it to be really coarse and rough on the outside. and to be a nice bowl on the inside. And I carved away the excess when I turned it over last time. And I want to make some more of these for the next wood firing. I'll make another one of these and wedge it so it's a little more consistent. And this can just pop off. I guess I need to take.
Put the bottom there, the tab.
On the other side.
Oh. Oh, I see. Okay.
You don't got the bat in there with it. You're good.
Things get pretty stiff overnight here.
So since we won't be here when you flip it over and trim it, what will you do on the trimming? How much will you take off?
I'll just cut away at it with a trimming tool
Okay.
or a wire. The ones I made at home, I cut with a wire, a twisted wire, and they're very coarse on the bottom. But they had a chino glaze on the inside, and I just thought they were terrific. And I thought, well, I'll try it on a bigger scale when somebody's taking a picture. Always a risky proposition. When I fire the big onigama, I have 2 onigama kills. When I fire the big one, I use 6 kinds of clay, and they all go in certain parts of the kill, and they also determine the kinds of forms that I'm making. And because each kill fires differently, that determines what I'm making also. So one of the things about working for a long time is that you have an incremental knowledge of the way a kill fires, particularly a wood burning kill. And so when you're working, it's not just that you know the kind of glaze you're going to use, or no glaze if that's appropriate, but you know where the pieces go in the kill. You know how to stack them. And you still can't get it right. There's just so much to discover. And every firing is a risk. And for those of us who choose to work that way, the real come on is the discovery factor. We're always discovering things we didn't know before, and that's setting us up for the next firing. And it's that sense of balancing what we know with what we don't know and putting that into operation every time we fire. That keeps it going. Keeps my shard pile growing too. It's almost embarrassing, the ratio of things that go in the shard pile as opposed to the things that don't. But
how do you view the functionality of these pieces? Is that important to you?
no, I think the functionality of pieces I'm willing to leave up to other people. Because I've seen pots used so many different ways that I think that's part of the challenge of seeing a new piece that you think you would like to live with. Sometimes you think about where it goes or what it might do. Last week, I helped my friend dig some holes. We rented a post hole digger and we dug a dozen holes for bluebird houses. And out of the last firing, I filled 2 5-gallon buckets with tea bowls. It didn't work. I just threw them in there. And when we were about to set the posts in the holes, I thought, I know, we won't put gravel down there, we'll put parts of tea bowls. And so they're perfect. And then we packed them around the side to keep them straight. It was just right. And as we were doing this, my neighbor said, functional pottery. I thought, yep. And that's just what it was. I dry these on the wood stove close. I have a big slab of stone on there, and so it lets them get very, very dry. And you bisque them slowly. Yeah, this is going to have some good potential. So with any luck, I'll be able to do this tomorrow.
Have you ever seen a Yumi trimming her bowls similarly to the way that you're opening your pieces?
No.
You've got some great videos of how she makes them on Sunday.
Uh-huh.
It's really amazing the way that she does it.
This is the tool I'm missing. Let's make it under the... This is the opposite end of the spectrum from that copper red cup. But there is a spectrum. I told someone that the things that I'm making, the things that are in this little exhibition here, about 15 or 20 years ago, I would have really hated seeing them. And now I think I'm making the right kinds of things. And what's responsible for that change? My wire. Oh, here's a string.
The spider friend is back on your pot. The spider friend is back on your pot.
Oh, okay.
I'll move these, okay?
Mhm.
Give you a little extra space.
I believe that seeing the right pot or meeting the right person on the right day can change things. My whole beginning for working in wood firing was in about 1978. I wrote a book on salt glazing, and as soon as it came to me in the mail, I thought it was a good book and that it was the best book I could write about salt glazing, and I simultaneously lost my interest in salt glazing. It was the most amazing feeling, very unnerving. And so I was walking around for a couple months wondering what to do with my pottery making skills and not knowing how to fire things. And I went to a flea market in Pottstown called Zern's, and there was this jug, a wood-fired jug, and I'd never seen anything like it before. It had $15 written on it in chalk. It was about that big. And I asked the proprietor about it, and he said, "Mister, that's been here for 2 years, and you're the first guy to pick it up. How about $8?" I said, "Okay." I bought it. I became more curious about it. I took it to the Smithsonian Institution. I found out it was made in France. And I wanted to make pots like that. And the reason I wanted to make them is that that was the first pot that I had seen that told a story about its experience. What had happened to it in the kiln? It had fallen over. So there was a bare space on the bottom. Ash had landed on the top and had gotten so hot that the ash melted and made these little glazed rivulets that moved around on the piece. And I just thought, that pot is showing us what happened to it. And I thought, yeah. So I met a guy from Virginia, Rob Bernard, who was working in Japan at that time. And he came to my college in 1978, and we built a wood kiln together, and we fired it. And that just, hate to say ignited, but it really got me moving in a direction that was quite unexpected. And so these wood-fired pots that I have here today are a result of that epiphany. Don't go away. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I can't use a flat stool. I want to be tipped toward the action.
Do you ever go standing up?
No, but I'm going to. I did one time when I was working at another potter's studio, and I liked it. When I went to Germany, I never saw a potter sitting down to throw. They all stood throwing up. Excuse me? Only the sick ones. But my sponge. Is this going to be in anybody's way? Is it or not? This clay's pretty wet, but I'll use some of the drier clay after a while too. I thought I would throw some enclosed forms, and tomorrow I'll paddle them around and change them. You notice on some of the rattles over there that they have an organic feeling about them. And I do that when they're leather hard. And I really enjoy the feeling of air being trapped in a form and being able to paddle it and move that cushion of air around inside the form. So we'll see how this goes. A tool I can't find, Andrew. It's that pointy one. Ah, there it is, thanks. Nope, that's not it. Nope, it's metal. And it's curved, and then I can make this work. Oh.
No, it's not here.
Oh.
In the bottom of your water bucket there?
Yep, something down there. Thank you. Okay, how about a Westchester story? I married the woman that I was dating when I was going here, and I was a year ahead of her, so I graduated and then got a teaching job down near Swarthmore. And she was still going to school, and she was living in a dorm. So I would come up, and sometimes we'd go to a movie or something. And this only happens when I'm on camera. So she was living in a dorm, and the dorm closed at 10 o'clock. All the women had to be in their dorms at 10 o'clock. This was after we got married. That's it. The timeline is different. We were married, and we were living out in Westtown. And we came into town to see the film. And on the way back, we drove by the women's dorm. And at about 9:45, it just, all the bushes turned into this passion pit. And all the dates were just, the women had to be in at 10 o'clock. So we went over and stood with everybody, kissing and hugging, and we were the last ones there, and the house mother came out. Her name was Bernice Burnett. And she said, "Time to come in." And we looked at her and we said, "Go to hell, we're going to a motel." And she said, "I'll get your names. I know who you are. I'll find out." We just left and perplexed the poor woman. But it was so, everybody was a captive to propriety. And it was our little way of getting even or something. Another Westchester story. Westchester had a rule against men wearing facial hair, and women too, I guess. After I graduated, I had to come back and take some summer classes for teaching certification. And I grew this innocuous little goatee. And the same dean of men that harassed me about going to a film with a black woman knocked on the door and made me come to his office. And he said, "We have a rule around here. You can't have any beards or mustaches." And I said, "Well, I'm not a student anymore. I'm just taking this class for permanent certification." He said, "If you don't shave it off, I'll see that you get no credit for your class." I mean, this guy had that kind of power. So I went home, I shaved off my goatee, I put the hair and the lather in a plastic bag, and I sent it to my roommate, who at that time was in the Peace Corps in the Philippines. And he got it just as he was about to leave for a staff meeting in Borneo. And when he got to Borneo, he bought a beautiful little box, nicely decorated. He sent me a picture of it. And he mailed it to the dean. And we always wondered how the dean felt when he got this beautiful little box from Borneo with some hair and lather inside it, with no kind of greeting or no return address. That guy deserved some kind of gift. Okay, so see what happens with the form. See, I wouldn't think about inverting this and trimming it after it was leather hard. I want it to have a kind of rising form, like it's holding its breath, like there's some air in there, which there is. And so I'm very carefully holding it in my left hand, and I'm going down to the bottom, and I'm trimming. But I'm also, I like to think I'm enlivening the form. By making it rounder. Oh, I didn't put anything inside. That's what I meant to do. Not to worry. And my towel, Andrew, here it is. The little things that rattle around inside are little pieces of porcelain that go into ball mills, so people are able to grind glazes. So I wrap them in a little bit of packing tape. Hard to do with wet hands. You do this, Andrew? Just pull me off of 6 inches or so. That's good, thank you. I just tape them up like this. I do that so that the pieces don't stick to the wet clay. And the tape burns away in the bisque. Many years ago, my friend David Shaner sent me a small hand-built form about that big. It was ovoid. And inside there was a little clay bead that rattled. And I was so surprised when I picked that thing up and heard the movement inside. So I started to make some. And I've been making them for years now. There's a name in Japanese for them called Ishi no Sasayaki. Ishi no Sasayaki means stone with secret voice. So that's how I think of them. It's something trapped in the dark that still has a voice. Yeah, it's completely enclosed, and tomorrow I hope they'll be dry enough so that I can paddle them and change their shapes. I'll make a series of these. It's enjoyable to chase that form around, chase the air around inside. Maybe I can put a couple of these together. Ooh.
How would you put them together? Would they still be their own form, with their own rattle on the inside of it, their own stone on the inside, to be attached, or?
Stay tuned. I'll show you. This is how you can enlarge the forms you make by putting two pieces together. If you can throw a competent cylinder you can stack forms up. This is how I throw all my larger pieces. There are a lot of ways to go about this. Some people like to put two bowls together, lip to lip, but I like to put these forms together when they're wet and find the form inside and push it out. I make about 95% of all my pieces on a kick wheel. A Randall wheel. It has a heavy concrete flywheel. And then you give it a kick and then it slows down. I like the momentum of it going away, slowing down as the pot gets thinner. So this is going to be the top of the pot down here. And this is going to be the middle. So I'm going to tuck this in a little bit. It's going to end up being the middle of the piece. So anybody who can throw a cylinder can make a piece that's bigger than the cylinder. This thing keeps jumping up, or maybe the bats are thinner than they might be. How many people have their first pot? First thing they made? Oh, good. Personal history.
You?
Yeah, I do. I have it. I dated it. It was in, I think it was November 1962. I'm not especially proud of it. You can't critique your first pot with the knowledge you have after you've been working for 60 years. It's not fair. You did the best you could. And it's good to have a record. But I don't have my second or third or 43rd.
My first soil pot in first grade, and then a bowl in third grade that I still have mine.
Uh-huh.
And then my first stuff I threw when John was my professor
Mm-hmm. Sometimes you go to your parents' house and you see early pieces and you think, oh, don't you want something more recent? Okay, so this is tapering in. The other one tapered in a little bit too, but the top is going to be wider. And when you're starting this, you would normally measure it with the calipers.
You want the calipers?
I brought some. Yeah, they're right there. And thank you. So this is basically the width up here, and I want that to go down in. So now I know I have to make this a little smaller.
The bottom?
Yes, this is the bottom. Whenever you throw, it's better not to keep adding water to it. At least I find that true. And I like to use a rib to compress the clay and also take the loose clay away, because when you compress it and dry it, then you're making the form stronger. I might want the torch for this, Andrew. This clay is pretty wet. Okay, now it will fit down in there. And I like to make it smooth. And I want this to overlap. I want there to be a good inch or so that it sinks down in there. So when I push them together, they'll be they'll become one form. How about hand me that? Thanks. It's too big.
So when you do it this way, Jack, you don't have to slip it and score it.
No.
Because it's still wet.
Yeah, it's still wet. So when you do this, yeah, I taught you something up in New York State too that it wasn't this, but you said it helped you. Whatever it was.
No, I think it was not using so much water was one of the things.
Right. That's pretty snug. So I'm working this back and forth here. Uh-oh. How do we get the torch going, Andrew? This is a mess. Does it have a striker? You have to open it all the way. Thank you. Do you want to wedge up a couple balls of that stiffer clay over there, the B-mix? Yeah. I have a large propane torch at home, and I use that for making the larger forms. The larger forms usually have about maybe three 25-pound balls attached, like for making the biggest one back there.
So that biggest one back there, that was made all on the wheel?
Uh-huh.
Do you ever take a bigger one like that and add coils to it, get even larger?
Excuse me?
Do you ever coil those pots, some of those bigger ones?
No. No, a lot of people build their biggest pieces with coils and roll them out on the floor and then pick them up and just throw the coil. And that works. Kevin Crowe does that very nicely, and so does Daniel Johnson down in North Carolina. Okay, so now I have a cylinder. I have some clay in here that should let me push it out some. I'm not going to make it super round or spherical, but I will push it out some. And a little bit of water and a little rib on the inside. Nah, don't need a rib. Now I can feel the joinery in there. But I can also feel the seam disappearing. I like to use the throwing stick to bring the shoulder up on these forms in a little while. I can keep the top enclosed. That gives me some leeway on the form. Do you want to make me one of my little packages?
Yeah. How many do you want that?
Oh, about 4 or 5. nice to make a totally enclosed form. You don't have to worry about the neck. Sometimes I throw a little tapering piece and just set it here like a lid and just smush it down in place. But with clay this coarse, it'll probably be okay with just compressing it. Got it? Thank you.
How many balls do you want there?
Oop. Korean potters put a little tray with charcoal on it down inside their great big pots to dry them out from the inside. So when I'm making big pieces like that, I leave the top open so I can put a 100-watt light bulb down in there, sometimes a couple of them. Pieces that dry from the inside hardly ever crack. Maybe you'd like to hear a poem, as if you had a choice. This poem is called Shopping for a Fuse. All paunch and jowls. The clerk at Miller's Auto Parts hands me a fuse for my Toyota pickup. Jack, I hunted all over that hill back of your place when I was a kid. Old Man Rhodes farmed the ground below you. Staunch Democrat, old Bill was. Kept a pet squirrel for years. Squirrel would climb all over you, but it was inclined to piss on a stranger. God, Bill would say. Another Republican. He only does that on Republicans. So I think of that as a found poem. If you're a poet or a writer of any kind, you always have to be wearing an invisible catcher's mitt. And when something comes along, it just hits you in the right way and you catch it. And you give it a life. Because otherwise, you're just going to be thinking about these things that happen. But if you don't write them down, they're going to keep bugging you. They're going to keep asking for an existence. That's what happened with this poem. This poem is called the Big Valley Stone Poem. Visitors often ask about the weather-sculpted stone I keep beside my driveway at the base of a white oak tree. I first saw it 6 or 7 years ago at a farm auction in Big Valley. Just recently, I took a notion to go back and see if it was still there. When I drove down the lane, a young Amishman came out of the barn, and I asked if he'd seen any unusual stones. "Let's have a look," he said. In a little while, we found it in a clump of weeds. "Would you mind if I took it? I like unusual stones." "You're welcome to it. Just grab your end and I'll get this one." Up went the stone for its first ride in a Japanese truck. I got in and started the engine. "I'm going to enjoy having this," I told him. "I hope you do. You ought to get around easier without that stone on your mind." That's just how it happened. Okay, goodbye, Nick. Did I put something in here? I forgot.
Yes.
Okay. Poetry doesn't always complement pottery. And forget what you're doing. So here I'm mushing this down, as you can see. If I'm using a fine-grained clay, sometimes I reverse the wheel so that it's not all the same motion to finish. So I'll just do that with this wheel. This wheel. Oh, it doesn't reverse. Oh, this is it. Or what?
Then do it one more time.
Is that it?
There's 3 positions. There you go.
Okay. No, it's in neutral.
Oh, you turned it off. There you go. Okay.
Thank you. Did you go down?
Turn it off. There you go. Forward.
There we go. Thank you.
You don't have that problem with your Randall wheel, do you?
A Randall wheel only goes one way. Okay, so you've made this cushion here, and it has a pneumatic core. It's full of air. And there are a lot of ways that you can push that air around when the clay is harder. And there are ideal times to do that, and we'll rely on the humidity in here tonight to see if we can dry it. Now, here's this thing again. See, you have a form, you've done it, you're happy about it. But the more you take away down here, the more lift there's going to be in the form. So I'm guiding it with my left hand, and I'm taking this clay away down here. So it's becoming more bulbous. There's something about these bat pins that they don't go down. That's nice, nice. Full of air. Now, did you wedge up some of those?
I did, Brad. What size did you want them?
If you don't mind me mixing the clays here, you'll just. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah, cut that in half, and I'll do 2 of them with it. Good, thank you. Okay. Oh, this is stiffer. I think I can make this work. So, questions? Do you have questions? You have to yell them at me through your mask.
Do you have a preference for what kind of clays you're using these days?
Yeah, I like standard 437. Anything that's white here, that's porcelain, is standard 437. And then I have 2 pots here that are made from Jordan clay.
That's the stuff you kept and held on to?
Yeah, Jordan clay is no longer available, but my friend died and left a lot of it. So that is nice, just the way it is, comes out of the bag. It's fairly high iron clay, very smooth, high shrinkage, beautiful color registration in the fire. The porcelain clay is just as nice glazed in the reduction kiln, but in the wood kiln, it's especially pretty. It has so many different colors.
Is anybody making sort of a faux Jordan clay? Are they compounding something?
Well, in my wood fire book, there are some formulas for making a ersatz Jordan with common materials, mostly ball clay, gold dart, clays that are smooth. They just shrink a lot. But that doesn't matter. Oh, this is really quite nice, Andrew. The consistency of it is nice.
All right, please. The B mix there, I think.
Uh-huh. And you got this from Baltimore Clay Works?
Certainly. Wonderful people down there.
I just started going down there. I bought some of the high water clays, which Jack, you'll see this summer.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what they're gonna do. One of them's really, really orange looking.
Limestone.
Yeah.
That's a great clay.
And one Helios also maybe? So they'll go in the wood.
Oh yeah, they look good. That limestone is very dark. In the wood.
I've been using quite a few clays from North Carolina, the Starworks clays.
Yeah.
Most of the dark T-bowls are made with that clay.
That dark star or the,
Yeah, dark star.
yeah.
And also the okiwimi. Okiwimi has less iron in it, but it throws and fires beautifully.
Have you used that new Catawba Wild also?
Yeah, I've used some of that. It's okay.
It goes very gray.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's put this one over here.
Do you have enough room, Jack? You need another board?
Hmm?
Another board?
I think it'll fit here. But
Jack, you leave that thick so you can pull it out later. Not that how thick are the walls?
oh, I'm so sorry I can't hear you.
So how thick are the walls? Are you leaving the walls thick for later?
I've opened all the way to the bottom. It's a little thinner up here and a little thicker at the bottom, maybe than it needs to be, but it gives me a lot to go on when I'm making the top of the pot. This is up here, it's a lot thinner. I'd rather pull some more up from the bottom, I think. But I'm afraid of these bat pins. They're nailing my finger.
So that was my other question. Why are you throwing on that? The other one you could throw. It's a closed form.
Well, when you use two pieces, I just know where all the clay is. I just feel comfortable having it there and knowing where it is. And I was taught to make a cylinder by flattening the clay out, pulling it out, and then coming in and then out like that. It's a kind of economy of material. You feel where everything is. So this is going to be my joint here. Yeah. Fighting these pins.
We don't use them around the studio, and I just realized I haven't found them. They were only two I could find.
Oh, well, that's
Find
okay.
their way into the slot bucket and then find their way into the mixer.
Ooh. There we go.
There you go. Trade me.
Oh, good. Thank you.
There you go.
Very good.
Have you lined these up before?
No.
Use the, here, I'll do it. It's a pain in the neck. You don't want to do that on camera the first time. There you go.
Look at that. Genius. Let's see how this works.
Who's your favorite potter?
What? You have to interpret.
Who's your favorite potter?
That's perplexing. Really good question. My favorite potter all time was David Shaner. David died in 1995. He was one of the first people to make his living from making pottery. He also started the Archie Bray Foundation out in Montana, which is a place where a lot of people have gotten their start or have gone to work after they got out of college. Historically, even before his time, I think the pots that I like most in all of history are Joman pots. Joman. They're Japanese. They were made for who knows what reasons. Very important reasons, probably spiritual reasons. They're very complex. They're all hand-built. We think they were built by women. We believe that the men were out hunting protein and the women were minding the jomanistas and making these incredible pots. When you look at those things, you just wonder where in the world their ideas were coming from. The tops of them, they almost look like flames sometimes, but they're not sticking up and they're not fragile. They're woven together. They often have holes in them where a rope might have gone through them. They're just open to so much speculation. And I guess that Robert Frost said, we love the things we love for what they are. And that's how I feel about Joman pots. I don't have to know why they exist. I'm just so happy that they do. And when you look at them and study them, you'll be amazed at how complex they are when they didn't have to be complex just to hold water or to serve a purpose of holding something. And whenever we come across things like that, not necessarily pots, but objects that take our hearts, then we're just so grateful that they exist and we can appreciate them for what they are. I would love to know more about them. I'd love to know more about the culture, but they didn't write anything. They didn't have a written language. And some of the African pots, too, are that way. They're some of the most gorgeous forms, really round. Okay, this is Jack's wacky theory of the day. Why is it that the people who live closest to the equator made the roundest pots? I mean, they didn't know they were living close to the equator. Is that a coincidence? You look at South America, look at the Peruvian vessels, Colombian, Venezuelan, Central American, and you look at the African pieces. The farther north you get, you go up to Scandinavia, everybody's making pots like this. Why is that? Ask an art historian. I really am curious to know. And if that's a stupid theory or not, it might be. It just seems to me, from looking at pots from all over the world, which I love to do, sometimes I think one of the most important aspects of pottery is something to be curious about. And I'm so grateful I can continue to be curious. When Thomas Edison was looking for a filament for the electric light bulb, he tried 1,000 different materials that did not work. And he was asked, isn't that frustrating to try 1,000 things that didn't work? And he said, oh no, I know 1,000 things that won't work. Now I know. I think he found that it was a bamboo filament that did it. It burned, but it was like one of those Coleman lanterns where you burn the little gauzy thing. And it's incredibly frail, but it works. And then I also like the pots from the Anasazi people in the Southwest and the Mogollon Rim. What are those pots called? They have the most beautiful designs. Mm-hmm. Voila. See, I got in trouble when I measured it. See, now I'm halfway on the overlap and I'm pushing that clay down. So I'm strengthening the seam by pushing down. This is very much like porcelain clay. It's smooth and plastic. This is like what I'm used to with the 437 body.
Where did you come across this method? Did you invent it?
I never saw anybody else do it. I've just gotten better at it.
I love it. I've never seen anybody do it like that.
See, a lot of people put two bowls together lip to lip, but when you do that, you're more than halfway home to the form. You're limited. And this way it lets you find a form. And by overlapping in here, you can bring it out that much farther. I like those jugs that the 19th century potters made back in the 1800s, 1820s and 30s. There were some really good throwers then. They were paid a penny a gallon to make their work. And they had to make 100 gallons a day. Now they didn't have to wedge all that clay. They had children wedging, 9-year-old kids. Excuse me. They had no child labor laws then. So, how many of you grew up in homes with handmade pots? Anybody? 1, 2. That's better than the other class. Oh, 3, 4. Dynamite. The other class only had 1 person. And how many of you know a poem by heart? Uh-oh. Grimm. Ah, 1. Good. I knew a guy from India who said that poems were so well known, national poems were so well known where he lived in Kashmir, that on a bus trip somebody would throw out a line, somebody else in the bus would give the second line, somebody else would give the third. No. I wonder if it was ever that way in this country. It's that way with songs in Japan. The Japanese educational system is such that they all grow up singing the same songs. There's something beautiful about that. People used to sing more. My dad was in the Lions Club, and they always opened the meetings with songs. Just a few songs, but it worked. A kind of social harmony. So important. More important than being right about your politics. Okay, now there should be a little green thing.
I had a professor in grad school that would always open every class with Hal Borland. Every class, didn't matter what we were teaching or what we were learning, we'd always open up one of his books, and it wasn't always poetry, but it was great writing.
That's really great. See, the more I throw, the drier the clay is getting. Now I'm getting up to where they were joined together, so I can have just that little bit more boost coming out.
One of the things you told earlier, I noticed you had some tape on your metal rib. Is that for grit? What is that?
No, I think it belonged to somebody else. But come to think of it, it works, doesn't it? Yeah, it gives me a little better grip. I think I won't close this in. I'll just make a jar with it. What have you been making, Joanne?
I've been making some tumblers with what I call undulating bottoms.
Uh-huh.
So that, well, first I do that whoops thing, which gives them a little swirl.
Yeah.
And cut out 3, sometimes 4 little pieces from the bottom, and then give it a sort of a thumb flick up.
Uh-huh.
So the bottoms seem to undulate a little bit.
How are you glazing them?
They are actually just sitting in boxes right now, waiting for wood.
Oh.
Wood, and some I'll glaze this summer. I'm sorry, this next month in a soda fire.
Uh-huh.
That I'll be doing, and mostly I'm going to probably glaze them with an oribe because I like those multiple colors in that particular fire at Wallingford, and yeah, I've been making them, a lot of them, and then some smaller cups, also with sort of a swirl in them, but then some sort of belly buttons in them, and some funny bottoms also.
Yeah.
Just some stuff that's a little tighter and some stuff that's a little looser.
This woman is highly motivated. She's a lawyer. And I don't think I know any other. Yeah, I know one other lawyer who's a potter. A former student of mine. He's the chief legal counsel for New York University.
Yeah, I'm trying to move away from that part of my life a little bit. A little intense.
You ever think about making pots when you're being a lawyer?
Yeah, I always think about making pots. In fact, technically I'm working right now. I'm remotely working, so I am thinking about pots and I'm working at the same time.
Good.
You ever think about being a lawyer when you're making pots?
No. No.
If you had to get a lawyer, wouldn't you want one that made pots?
Yeah, probably. I want an actor. Yeah. Yeah, you'd be well served.
This is just going to come in and it's going to conclude up here. Nick's lips are really important parts of pots. I mean, the thinner the neck gets up here, the more fragile the whole pot is going to look. So I like to emphasize the lip on a piece so that it has an identity. It says, I am the lip. And I want to compress it. It's the most vulnerable part of the pot. It can be picked up by the neck and not have to worry about it chipping because it might be too fragile. I'll just see what I can get away with here by pushing out some more. This is where the outward curve starts. And your eye just follows that line. Pots from the Song Dynasty have this kind of feel to them. I so enjoyed going to China. They took us to the cave where kaolin was discovered, the first white clay that anybody ever knew about that could be made into porcelain.
Where was that?
It's when?
Where?
I think that was about 96, something like that.
Where in China?
We went to Jingdezhen, and a program sponsored by West Virginia University. And we lived in a dormitory. I think there were about 24 of us. And we went to museums. We got to watch potters working, making things, and especially in traditional ways. We went to kill sites out in the countryside. You just see, you'd be driving along on a flat terrain, and all of a sudden there's a lump with a bunch of houses around it and a little village. And that lump used to be a kill 1,000 years ago. And you could go over, and it would be covered with vines. Watch out for the snakes. And there are shards there of broken pots. And at that time, you could pick them up and people laughed at you, and there wasn't any big deal. Now, I think it's probably people are more respectful and they don't bring back all the shards they can stuff in their camera bag. But it's a powerful thing to confront history, the history of what we're doing. I think they would all laugh at what we're doing. Maybe they would respect it. I don't know how they feel. But I'm glad they did what they did. And I'm glad it never died out. Maybe I'll paddle this one tomorrow. Maybe we should take a little break. But I'm still going to work on this bass a little bit. I want to keep it stable, but have it be smaller. I'll read you a poem. I talked to the other class about this locale. If I was going to teach here, I would ask people to do some basic research into the ceramic history of this area because it's very rich. There were so many potters living in this area in the 1900s that you would be surprised. They were all around out toward Kennett Square, Avondale, and up through Exton, Downingtown, up towards Pottstown. And they were making the only containers that people had for their food. They were vital parts of their community. Okay, and this is for the abolitionist potters of Chester County. See, when slaves were escaping this time of year, they would come up and stay with Quaker potters, and they would be hidden in their kilns and their wood piles, and they would be transported often to the next potter in a wagon full of pottery and straw. Sometimes a whole family, sometimes one or two slaves escaping. And it was very risky because of the fugitive slave law. Slaves were considered property, and when people escaped, there were bounty hunters who went looking for them, and they were rewarded with money for capturing slaves and returning them to their owners. So a lot of the Quakers who lived in the area were also potters, and a lot of them were willing to risk being charged with the fugitive slave law, breaking it. So they appear in this poem. It's called The Wind in the Jug. And they were called bluebird potters because they farmed in the winter. They made their pots in the winter, and then they farmed in the summer, and they made pots in the winter, and they fired them this time of year because this was about the time when people began planting their fields, and they were going to be potters, they were going to be farmers after they fired their kills. And when the bluebirds came back to nest, that's when they fired their kills, so they were called bluebird potters. Bluebird potters, they called you. Your kill smoke grafting winter onto spring. You had the power to call birds north with a gallon crock wrung by your knuckle. Toning the fire-birthed heat to the breeze, that clear note drifting south below the Mason-Dixon line. Your county's hills enclose me here, the way that sleepers' knees push up green quilts. In this fieldstone cellar hole open to March's sky, I find your stoneware jug tamped in a niche 150 years ago. Blue-gray clay hide restrains the bulbous dark inside. I sniff the vinegared past, tip my ear to this conch, this echo holder, stamped by a whorl at the handle's base. I read you by your thumbprint, Potter. Malin Brocious, John Vickers, I hear you in there. My breath across the jug mouth rumbles. Sound spills from this clay chrysalis, like that of distant tumbrils or your wagons mounded high with straw-packed mugs and porringers. Slaves, runaways, were the heart of your cargo. Scheming their freedom, you trundled them north, Quaker to Quaker, binding the law's weak wrists with your compassion. Within these cellar walls, I'm centered like a man who wakes up in a bowl. This stony jug's the gift of time and flesh and fire. Its hand-fixed form now shapes the wind these bluebirds ride and liven with their song. Hold back here, jug, the earth from closing down. So when you have a sense that what we're doing had already happened and that we're following an important tradition, I think it's good. It keeps us from only thinking that we're the important ones, that nobody else came first. There's an unwritten novel that somebody should write about those people, about escaping slaves and helping them get to Canada, where most of them were headed. And it was through the Underground Railroad, of course, that they made their moves, usually at night, and usually through the kindness of strangers. I think it's a brilliant chapter in our history. And not all the Quakers were abolitionists. Some of them wanted to be law-abiding citizens. Even if the law was stupid, they didn't want to risk breaking it and going to prison and upsetting their families. a lot of them from around here went down into Maryland to get clay in the fall. When the crops were harvested, they would get together and they would go down there with empty wagons and they'd fill it with clay and bring it back up. And there was a tavern along the way where they must have had a great time, stopping off and eating and then doing the work and coming back. And just getting all those pots to market had to have been a real chore. And they sold them for nothing. It was still enough for them to make a living, but not very much. But it was necessary work, both in providing containers, jugs for molasses, vinegar, whiskey, whatever liquid they had, and churns for making butter. Those honorable work. And they didn't make artwork, except once in a while somebody would decorate special pieces. Sometimes it was women who did the decorating and pulled the handles for the jars, and the men were just working. Sometimes just one or two people in a little pottery. They were using a treadle wheel, and they had a horse-powered clay mill. The horse would walk around in a circle, and there would be a shaft, wooden shaft that came down, and then something like a great big bucket. And on the wooden shaft, there were wooden tines that stuck out. So they'd put the clay in there. The horse would walk around. It would turn this thing. And the story is that when the horse got too old to be useful anymore, they would turn it out to pasture, and they would have to go out and move the horse because it would only graze in a circle. But you can think about that. But let's see. What else should I do? Should I make something else? Do you want to see me make anything? Want to see me stop talking? What feels though there ought to be something I could do. You want to see me cut that pot in half? That would be okay.
So why did you get so into poetry? And do you write any of your own?
Wait, you have to.
Oh, that is your book.
My ears aren't so good.
I said, how did you get so into poetry?
Oh, well, I was teaching English down near Swarthmore, and the teacher there he knew how to make pots. And I really enjoyed talking with him. He was the first Quaker I'd ever met, and we had long conversations after school. He would be working at the wheel, and we would just be talking about life. And then one day I noticed what he was doing, and it just seemed so magical, and so I asked him if he would teach me, and he tried. I had no native ability. It took me longer to learn to center than anybody I ever taught. I'm not kidding. It was so painful for me how this tiny ball of clay could make me look like such a stooge. I couldn't understand anything about it. And I asked Jim one day, is this centered? Because I'd always been asking him if it was centered, and he'd come over and he'd say, oh, almost, Jack, and he would hold my hands, he'd go, and it would come on center. And one day he said, Jack, if you have to ask, it isn't centered. So I thought, right, it's feeling, you know. A blind person could center. So it's a matter of feeling. And it's like learning to swim or ride a bicycle. As long you learn to center, you know how to center for the rest of your life. It doesn't go away. And it's a powerful feeling. It's a kind of harmless power, being able to just make the clay go where you want it to. You know, after being told it doesn't want to go there. And so, yeah, And then I just got more interested in it. It just still seems like a miracle that you can just take a ball of clay and you can make it into something useful. And that other people like it. They appreciate it. Maybe some of the other people want to do it themselves. It can be contagious that way with some people. It's very satisfying to be able to make something, anything. I mean, Andrew made these incredible tables. They're not going to go anywhere unless there's a fire here. They're just made for the long haul. And it's satisfying. So we are not raised in this culture to make things. We're raised to buy things and get money to buy things. And when you drink out of a cup that you made yourself, it's an experience. Really is. Or you drink out of a cup that somebody you know made. It's moving. It's a moving experience. So we're adding to the millions of handmade pots. How many people at this moment are making a cup in this country? I mean, don't even try to count. It has caught on amazingly well. There has to be something important. So I wrote up an exhibition of cups. We have a show in our gallery of pots made by 112 different potters. I think there are about 200 pots in it, and they're all owned by 2 people in town. And I wrote about it. As I was writing this review, it occurred to me that we're all pursuing the same illusion, and that is that there can't be too many cups in the world, only too few shelves. And so you think about having a special cup for whatever reason. It's nice to have a special cup. Somebody you know made it. You made it yourself. It's just a good thing. But part of the illusion is that the world can't have enough cups, and we can't keep up with the need. And so we're trying to fill all these imaginary orders for cups. And it's just, I couldn't walk out of Andrew's office yesterday without picking up just about every cup in there and learning about who made them. And they're so different. I mean, I could not recognize my own cup in that collection. Somebody else pointed it out to me. I thought, what happened? And then I thought, yeah, I could have made that. But it was signed, and the first 2 times I went through the exhibition, I didn't recognize it. It was just so different from anything I was doing now. So, yeah, we leave this trail of our work. And if you've made pots for a while, you know what that's like. We're leaving some kind of 3-dimensional history behind us. And when you get to be 70, 80 years old, your appetite for buying pots, I mean, you have to keep it on a short leash because they look terrific and you want them, but maybe your living space is shrinking. A lot of the people who bought our work over the years are downsizing, and that's doom for a potter. Figuring out which pieces to keep and which to let go, which to trade. Pots are a form of currency. This guy I know of wanted to borrow money from a bank to build a studio when he got out of college. So he knew it was going to be uphill to go to a banker and tell him he wanted to borrow money to build a pottery studio and a kiln. So sure enough, the banker said, well, I'm sure that making pottery is a fascinating hobby for you, and it must bring you a lot of pleasure. And the guy said, well, I studied it in college, and it's more than a hobby. It's really a way to make a living. And the banker just couldn't get his head around that. Thoughtfully, the potter had brought a 1-pound ball of clay in a plastic bag in his coat pocket, and he put it out. And then he reached in the other coat pocket and he put a mug there. And he said, you see this ball of clay? And the banker said, yes. He said, it costs less than a nickel. And in 3 minutes, I can make it into a mug like this and sell it for $40. The banker said, you can? And he got his loan. You know, you just have to think in terms of the banker or somebody. Put it in a little context. So you know what's going on. This poem is the last one in my book, and this puts what I do in a context. It's called Containment. I have picked up, moved, shaped, and lightened myself of many tons of clay, and those tons lifted, moved, and shaped me, delivering me to this living space I wake and move about in. Space perhaps equal to that I have opened and enclosed in plate, cup, bowl, jug, jar. I'm thankful no one ever led me to the pit I'd helped to make in earth, or showed me all the clay at once. I'm grateful no one ever said, there, that heap's about 150 tons. Go make yourself a life. And, oh yes, here's a drum of ink. See what you can do with that. I wouldn't have known where to begin. So that's how it works. I don't know, maybe I'll, oh, these are almost ready to trim. It is nice and dry in here, isn't it? So by tomorrow, I can probably paddle those things over there.
Jack, what's the tool that's right in front of you, that big piece of...
I don't know. Andrew gave me this today. I think it has something to do with discipline. What do you use it for? Just.
To make a slab.
Yeah.
Turn the other way. Look around there, that would take it. Make slabs.
Mm-hmm. I've got one about twice as big at home that I just beat on really dry clay to break it down. But yeah, it's nice. I bet you made it too.
Yep.
Yeah. Andrew's great with wood.
Yes, he made all his students one of them.
Yeah.
And a wheel.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Table.
Terrific.
And I think your pottery is your poetry also, for sure.
Yeah, on a good day. Right.
Even on a bad day, poetry is poetry.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe I could make a couple of cups with this clay. I wasn't too happy about those ones in the morning. I'll just make a couple cups here and see how this goes. The porcelain clay was a little wet, but this feels pretty good. Clays have so many different personalities.
Have you ever harvested wild clay?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I used to take my classes out. One time I taught a whole class and the only thing we bought were cones. We made little kilns scaled down wood kills. You have, Andrew, why don't you bring that cup in you showed me? The one, well, bring them both over, would you, from your office? Yeah. So a little bit.
Jack, were you always a poet, like from when you were young, or how did you come to poetry?
I guess from teaching it and just liking it. But I didn't see my own life in terms of having poetry potential, I guess you'd say. No, some people get started on it much earlier, and they know that that's what they want to do exclusively. I have a very hard time making time for writing. It's always the kinetic thing about making stuff, and the sedentary work of poetry. I just tend to put it off because you're just sitting someplace. But as someone said, I hate to write, but I love to have written.
But you have a lot of poems in your head.
Yeah.
Aren't necessarily poems that you wrote, right? You recite a lot of poetry.
Yeah.
It's not all your poetry. Right?
Yeah. I don't know why some poems stay with you. I wrote one that I wrote one about my brother's tonsils.
Move this board over. Do you have some place to put your pots? Or can you just move this piece?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. That's a real bomb.
This weighs
Yep.
2.5 pounds, everyone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so when my brother had his tonsils out, we had them for years in the house afterwards. Well, I'll just tell you the poem. They'll save them for you, someone told him before the operation. And when he woke up, there they were in a little mayonnaise jar in alcohol. They were the size and color of chewed bubble gum, and the adenoids clotted yellow tallow. When the alcohol evaporated, we'd rattle them in their glass casket and pour new in and watch them bob and sink and settle. Our friends dared us to take them out and touch them, but the closest we came was to skewer one on a fork, and everyone ran screaming off the porch. Once he ran brandishing them through the north living room, mortifying Mother and her guests. One day, on my way home from school, a classmate told me about a man who had gone to jail for opening his pants and showing Judy Kergear his tonsils. Why, I wondered, had he kept this little jar in there? Most of my poems are more tasteful than that. Okay, well, Andrew showed me this cup.
Well, they're right here. I brought them in here. I'm not getting fresh here either, but I'm going to kick this in because here's the back thing is going to fall off again.
Oh, okay.
It's going to fall on my watch. Is the cup?
Yeah, well, I made that one in his left hand. Yeah, you can pass them around if you want to. That one, it just seems so stiff to me now. So I thought, well, I'll make one similar, but a little more lively.
The first piece is when Jack was a visiting artist at Towson University when I was a senior. And he made that and left the bisqueware there. And I fired it in a ghetto little kiln in the courtyard that was a converted electric kiln.
And this was,
2001.
and this was before eBay, so he didn't try to auction it off.
I was never auctioned.
Okay, so I've made this a little thinner, a little bit thicker, to see if I can facet it. Sometimes they just fly off. Okay, so basically, this is what we have. Now that one that's going around, I shaved it down with a Stanley hand tool, a little rasp-like tool. And so it's very tight. And what I'd like to do now is see if I can give it a little bit of movement. So I have the basic cup. I'm just going to go inside it with a rib. So when you make facets, you make places for glaze to play at a high temperature. And that gives you opportunity for the surface and the form to meet up in a good way. Also, you've made little windows. The clay that I use is translucent when it's thin. And so you have this situation that can be really wonderful. You're drinking a cup of tea in a sunny location, and the light will actually pass through the cup and through the tea, and you see the cup and the tea being lighted up. And the rim is a little bit different too. I'll make another one to show even more how not being quite so compulsive about the faceting will give a different feel to the cup. See, a cup is the most intimate thing that we make. It's always within arm's length. We touch it to two parts of our body at the same time. And what other artist can say that about what they're doing, what they're making, how other people are going to use it? Pay a lot of attention to the rim. Don't want it too sharp. It's going to get chipped, being handled a lot. Like to have a little bit of an out curve or just be straight. This be a little bit outsized. I kick the bottom out just a little. We'll just do this a little more relaxed way, leave some clay here and there, and see what happens when I go back inside. So the rim's going to dance around a little bit more. Because the cup is thick and thin. There are basically two types of tea bowls, winter tea bowls and summer tea bowls. Winter tea bowls have steep sides to keep the heat in cold weather. The summer tea bowls are more open, almost like the one you showed me, the blue and white one. A little, I'm going to make one more and see if I can get it right. This is, so have you ever made something that you didn't like very much, but somebody else really liked a lot? And what do you do? Do you just keep quiet? Do you try to explain why it's not very good? So if you do that, then you're saying you're dissing somebody. Maybe they see something in it that you haven't seen yet. And have you ever made something that you didn't think was very good and then you saw it on another day and you were missing something the first time you saw it? There's all kinds of little dilemmas we get into about our work, how we think about it, how we talk about it with other people. Other people are really important to what we do. That's one of the conundrums I have about the 19th century potters. I wondered how protective they were about their information. I wondered if they shared information, because the history of ceramics is a history of deathbed secrets, especially in Europe. Did anybody ever read the Arcanum? Oh, did you ever read the Arcanum? Oh, it's such a phenomenal book. It's about the discovery of porcelain in Europe. Europe just went nuts when Chinese porcelain arrived there. And one man started out by claiming he could turn base metals into gold. And then he was given the opportunity to turn base metals into gold in front of the king, who needed money because he was going broke fighting a war in Sweden. And he imprisoned this guy, Bechter, for 18 years, and he escaped twice and was brought back into this dungeon laboratory until he discovered porcelain. It is the most fascinating book. It's the only ceramics book I've ever read that could be turned into an opera. It's so dramatic. I mean, there were marriages between families for glaze recipes. You know, I'm not kidding. I finished that book and I just went right back and read it again.
What was that called?
The Arcanum, Arcanum. I'll think of the woman's name who wrote it in a minute. There are actually two books called the Arcanum. It's about the discovery of porcelain in 18th century Germany. And for a while, porcelain was more valuable than gold. Frederick the Great built a wing on his castle to display his porcelain collection. And they were ghastly little things. They loved figurines. People dressed up in like wigs, ridiculous clothes. See, it was so secretive, the information, and people's entire fortunes and their ability to survive in the world depended on what they knew. So they had to be very protective of it.
The author was Janet Gleason.
Hmm?
Gleeson.
Yeah, Janet Gleason. Oh, if I were you, I would just, it's probably the only book in the workshop that I would suggest you just read it.
Bought it for $5 on eBay. My house next week.
Yes, it's cheap. I have bought so many copies of that book and given it away.
But we have our book club book for the fall.
Oh, do you have a book club? Oh, start a book club.
And did you have, I'm trying to find around this, like a pottery of Chester County.
I have that one too.
So, but it's only 1930 or something?
Yeah.
And
Talking
the
about
Chester
that.
County potters.
Yes.
It's a great book.
Right, that he was talking
Yeah.
about. It's amazing. It's got all the potteries in
Yep.
Chester County. And very cool.
There's another one. Good ceramics books.
Potters and pottery. Talks about this.
And the treadle wheel and how others met it out there. And, that's pretty neat book.
Cool.
I traded a cup for it.
There's a really good one about African pots called In the Shadow of the Sacred Grove. It's about those big round tribal pots, really iconic pots. I'm not sure if they were made in Nigeria. Nigeria has a really strong pottery connection. That's where Michael Cardew went and introduced high-firing ceramics to those people, In the Shadow of the Sacred Grove. And then what is that wonderful Korean book? It's written by an American, but it's about a boy, a single shard. Yeah, about an adventure that a young boy has with a celadon pot. A single shard. And then there's that wonderful book by Lila Phillip, Philip. Lila Phillip majored in Japanese at Princeton, and she went to work at a traditional Japanese pottery in the south part of Japan, the part that is closest to Korea. And it's called the Road to Miyama, Miyama. And in this part of Japan, they speak a different kind of Japanese that isn't understood by somebody who goes to Princeton and studies Japanese. It's called Kagoshima Ben. Kagoshima Ben is a Japanese dialect that's very particular to that region. I just inherited 114 ceramics books, all of which I already have. So I'm going to sell them to a woman who's, she runs the only ceramics bookstore. What's the name of that? She lives in Corning, New York. But I'm always happy when I meet people who are interested in reading, because books, a lot of people are just not reading books about clay anymore because of the internet. But that's no excuse. They're just so what other books are good? A Potter's Book by Bernard Leach. That was really the only book in print when I started making things. Well, there was one by Henry Varnum Poor. I think it's called A Potter's Book. And then Daniel Rhodes came along. I think Daniel Rhodes was our best ceramics writer. He wrote 5 books, and they are all terrific. Clay and Glazes for the Potter has been a potter's Bible for many of us. Stoneware and Porcelain, Pottery Form, Tamba, The Timeless Art of a Japanese Village, and the book on kills. Yeah, all really worthwhile books.
You read The Nature and Art of Workmanship by David Pye?
Yeah, it's not an easy read.
No, but a worthwhile read.
Uh-huh. Yeah, Rhodes was fascinating. He taught painting at Alfred, but he wrote 5 ceramics books. And he played cello. Really remarkable guy. Went to the University of Chicago. Well, I think it's about time to be
4:30. You want to take a break before
quiet.
you
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
So, everybody